In the 2004 NFL Draft, Eli Manning, Philip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger were the first three quarterbacks taken. Eli followed in his brother's footsteps and was drafted first overall, and went on to play for the New York Giants for 16 seasons. Philip Rivers was drafted fourth and would play 16 seasons for the Chargers before playing his final season with the Colts, and Roethlisberger was taken 11th and is still the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers to this day. The draft situation that night was weird. Eli wasn't drafted by the New York Giants. The Giants didn't have the first overall pick. The Chargers did. The Giants had the fourth pick, which is where Rivers was taken. After the Chargers took Eli Manning first overall, the Giants had a decision to make. Eli would have been their first choice, but with that option off the table, their second choice was Ben Roethlisberger. However, prior to the draft and on draft night, Eli and his father had already indicated they didn't want to be Chargers and they wanted to be in New York. The Giants organization was pretty sure that the Chargers would rather have Philip Rivers as their QB than Ben Roethlisberger, so the Giants didn't take their own second choice with the fourth pick. They took the Chargers' second choice, and with it, they took a gamble. They were betting they could trade Rivers to the Chargers in return for Eli. The trade went through the same night, and with it, three different brand new franchise QBs found their team for the next 16 seasons, which is crazy. I mean, how rare is that? In the 11 draft classes between 1990 and 2000, only 6 quarterbacks managed to play for at least 16 seasons in their NFL career. By the way, so you don't have to look it up, they were Brett Favre, Mark Brunell, Kerry Collins, Peyton Manning, Matt Hasselbeck, and Tom Brady. And of those 6, only Brady played at least 16 seasons with the team he ended draft night with. So in 11 years, there was only one guy who could match these 3 for being an extended face of the franchise. And then in one night, and only 11 picks, and with no other QBs taken, 3 franchises all got their man for the next 16 years plus. Huh. You have to be a pretty good quarterback to keep your job for 16 years straight, so it's fair to say these 3 were all very successful in the NFL. Let's take a look at just how successful. Here's what their career numbers looked like after the 2019 season, at which point Eli Manning retired. Eli threw more interceptions and lagged a little bit behind in the rate stats like completion percentage and yards per game, but he still has pretty similar career numbers to the other 2 who, weirdly, are almost identical. Eli Manning's counting stats are still pretty close, thanks to the 210 straight regular season games he started at quarterback for the New York Giants starting in his rookie season, tied for the 10th longest streak ever. The passing yards, touchdowns, and even the career wins for Eli were directly comparable to either Rivers or Roethlisberger at this point in time. But let's move forward to the next meaningful moment in the career of these 3 quarterbacks. Here's what those same numbers looked like after the 2020 season, at which point Rivers retired. He and Roethlisberger are still indistinguishable from each other, but they managed to separate their counting stats somewhat from Manning with an extra year in the league. In case you don't follow the NFL closely enough to know how impressive these numbers are, let me go ahead and give you some context. These 3 are all in the top 10 in career passing touchdowns, ranked 5th, 8th, and 9th, above people like John Elway, Johnny Unitas, and Joe Montana. They're all top 10 in career passing yards, and they're all top 10 in career completions, and they're all right next to each other in these rankings. So if they are so similar, why aren't their Hall of Fame cases also similar? Ben Roethlisberger's a lock for Canton as soon as he retires. The general consensus is that Eli Manning will be in the Hall of Fame one day, but a lot of people aren't happy about it, and it's harder to say what will happen with Philip Rivers, who at the moment appears to have the best individual stats of any of them. Rivers went to 8 Pro Bowls, Roethlisberger 6, and Manning 4. None of them received an MVP award or first-team All-Pro honors, so what's the difference?
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me?
Here are Manning, Rivers, and Roethlisberger's playoff stats through the end of the 2020 season, which again is when Philip Rivers retired. The first thing you might notice, because I put it at the top, is that Roethlisberger has basically played in twice as many playoff games as the other 2. That's because his teams were more successful. Here's the regular season winning percentage for these 3 through the end of the 2020 season. One of the biggest arguments against Eli Manning joining Peyton in the Hall of Fame is that Eli's team only won half of the games he started. People want to equate QB success with team success, since a quarterback does usually have more control over a game than any other single player. If a QB is great, then his team should be great. So, they reward Roethlisberger for the incredible success of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they punish Eli Manning for the mediocre play of the New York Giants. In addition to losing as many games as he won, people also won't be happy about a modern passer being in the Hall of Fame when he threw as many interceptions as Eli Manning did. Luckily for Eli, the playoffs helped him address both of these complaints. In every sport, players tend to have slightly worse stats in the playoffs than in the regular season. This makes sense since in the playoffs you're usually only playing against the really good teams. So with that in mind, let's look at the playoff stats for our three guys again. Philip Rivers still looks good, but his yards per game and yards per attempt dropped because his completion percentage dropped. He also threw interceptions more often in the playoffs, but he threw enough touchdowns to have a higher touchdown to interception ratio than regular season Eli Manning. But it is fair to say his playoff stats aren't as good as his regular season stats. Same with Roethlisberger, but for slightly different reasons. Roethlisberger's yards per game and completion percentage basically stayed the same in the playoffs, and he still threw a ton of touchdowns. But he also threw an awful lot of interceptions. Remember that thing that people criticize Eli Manning for? Roethlisberger has almost thrown as many interceptions as touchdowns in the playoffs, but his team still won most of the time, so I guess all is forgiven. Remember, people hold QBs responsible for their team's success. Rivers had a losing record in playoff games, and that's what tarnishes his extremely impressive career personal stats in the eyes of many. In fact, Philip Rivers never even played in the Super Bowl. But Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger both won 2 Super Bowls. Remember when I said Eli Manning addressed the complaints about his resume in the playoffs? Well, the first complaint was that his teams didn't win enough. What about winning 8 of the 12 playoff games he started in his career and beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl twice? What about winning Super Bowl MVP in both of those games? That sounds like a winner to me. Well then, what about all those interceptions that Eli liked to throw? Well, he didn't throw them in the playoffs. Eli is the rare quarterback whose playoff stats look better than his regular season stats. He threw twice as many touchdowns as interceptions in his playoff career. Rivers didn't do that. Roethlisberger isn't even close to doing that. Even Peyton Manning didn't do that. In the 2007 Super Bowl playoff run, Eli threw 6 touchdowns to only 1 interception. In the Giants' second Super Bowl playoff run in 2011, he threw 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. So when the games mattered most, Eli threw an awful lot of touchdowns and very few interceptions. But if you care so much about legacy and you want to talk about team success, let's talk about it. Let's talk about defense. I went and found the defensive rankings for the teams on which Manning, Rivers, and Roethlisberger played at least 9 games that season. These ranked season defenses by points allowed. Eli Manning's average defense ranked a little worse than 19th in a league of 32 teams. Rivers' defenses averaged 13th in the league. On the other hand, over the course of his career, Roethlisberger has enjoyed playing with an absolutely elite defense. The average rank of his defenses was 7.4375. This is better than Terry Bradshaw's defense, which ranked 8.25 in a league that only had 26 to 28 teams and had a special name called the Steel Curtain. And Ben Roethlisberger's average defense was pretty comparable to Tom Brady's defenses, which ranked 7.2632, and Tom Brady won more Super Bowls than Ben Roethlisberger. Why do these stats matter? Because elite defenses have as much to say about who wins the Super Bowl at the end of the year as elite quarterback play does. To demonstrate that, consider the following. Between 2003, when the league first had 32 teams in the current playoff structure, and 2020, the Super Bowl winning team had a top 6 defense in terms of points allowed 9 times, which is exactly half of the time. In the same period, Super Bowl winning teams had a top 6 Pro Bowl quarterback 8 times. In those 18 seasons, the number 1 or number 2 ranked defense won 5 Super Bowls, whereas teams with a first or second team All-Pro quarterback won 4. In that same period, a top 6 defense failed to make the playoffs 23 times, and a top 6 Pro Bowl quarterback managed to miss the playoffs 20 times. All of those numbers are very comparable and make me think a top 6 quarterback is just as valuable as a top 6 defense, at least as far as winning the championship is concerned. And if you believe, as I do, that the defense has as much control over the team's success as the quarterback, then you can't praise or chastise a quarterback for the team's success without also considering the defense. If you don't believe the defense is important, then you're wrong, and I will talk about that in another video possibly, but let me give you one last nugget. 4 different NFL quarterbacks have won at least 3 Super Bowls. Between them, Terry Bradshaw, Joe Montana, Troy Aikman, and Tom Brady have won a total of 18 Super Bowls, but none of them have managed to do it with a defense ranked worse than 8th in the league in points allowed that season. That makes it all the more impressive, then, that Eli Manning won 2 championships with defenses ranked 17th and 25th, and in both of those, he defeated defenses in the Super Bowl ranked 4th and 15th, respectively. Eli's playoff runs were pretty incredible, and maybe for that reason, he doesn't receive the same level of recognition for his 2 Super Bowl wins as Ben Roethlisberger does. The narrative is that Roethlisberger's championships were the natural progression of excellence for a great player, but Eli's were kind of magical flukes. Separately, in Philip Rivers, we might see what Ben Roethlisberger could have been without his elite defense. Roethlisberger is generally considered the best of these 3, and his team's winning ways are often seen as a testament to his greatness. However, Roethlisberger has the worst playoff stats of any of these quarterbacks. Philip Rivers, by a nose, has the best individual regular season stats, but he didn't win in the playoffs. He didn't have a defense that was as bad as Eli's, but he didn't have one anywhere near as good as Roethlisberger's. And Eli had the worst stats in the regular season, but the best stats in the playoffs, and he won 2 Super Bowls despite a defense much worse than the other 2 had. In the metrics of regular season stats, playoff team success, and defensive help, all 3 of these quarterbacks are at the top of at least one of those categories and the bottom of at least another one. Here are my main points. Debating who was better is more interesting to me as a numbers guy than debating who was greater. Legacy accomplishments are not entirely under each individual's control. And when we try to figure out who was better, it's hard. These 3 were drafted on the same night and will end their careers with very similar numbers, but edging out the other 2 in certain categories and taking a back seat to the other 2 in certain other categories. Philip Rivers looked amazing in the regular season, and his team won a lot in the regular season despite just average defense. His playoff teams possibly had better quarterback play than Roethlisberger's playoff teams, but ultimately one of them won and one of them didn't, and that matters a whole lot to a lot of people. Eli Manning was truly magical in his Super Bowl playoff runs, and he deserves true respect for them, not the begrudging acknowledgement he usually gets at the moment. And Roethlisberger gets a lot of credit for his team's success, which he should. But people rarely remember to also include praise for his defenses. And when you consider defensive play, these 3 franchise quarterbacks, all taken in the same draft, just 11 picks apart, may have produced about as similarly as it's possible to in their careers. They were tied together from draft night, and they should always be remembered as the 2004 Triplets they are.